Hello, this is my verbal assignment on the short story The Veldt. To begin with, I would like to summarize the story. Ray Bradbury's short story The Veldt, written in 1950, follows the Hadley family, George and Lydia Hadley, and their two children, Peter and Wendy, who lives in a technology-advanced house, where Lydia is concerned about the nursery, which is a room designed to produce virtual reality based on their children's thoughts and desires. When they visit the nursery, they get attacked by lions, which eventually makes Lydia want to shut down the nursery. George later then visits the nursery again and notices that the room will not change the Veldt landscape. Lydia then suspects that the room is stuck or that Peter is somehow managed to change its machinery. And then when the children later returns home, they pretend to not know anything about the Veldt. George tells Peter that he's thinking about shutting the nursery down forever, and Peter reacts by threatening his father. They then call a psychologist called David McLean to ask for his opinion. Then George eventually ends up shutting down all the technology in the house, and the children are being very angry and frustrated and are desperately begging their parents for one last minute in the nursery, which the parents ends up allowing. Then Peter and Wendy call the parents while they're inside the nursery, and then when George and Lydia run into the nursery, the children lock them inside. The parents, who now realizes that the screams that they previously heard came from the nursery, and then they are attacked and killed by the lions. Now I have to comment on the role of technology in the story. In this story, the technology shows the dangerous effects that it has on children and how technology also affects society by making it seem like technology makes life easier, and in this case maybe a bit too easy. In fact, technology makes life so easy in this case that it doesn't even feel like living anymore. It doesn't feel like a real life. As the technology in the world seems to ruin the everyday life as a family, because the kids aren't really reading anymore, and they aren't playing outside anymore, because they are getting amused by the nursery, which seems like it has become a replacement. Some sort of a replacement parent to the kids. So it shows that even though the technology seems like a good thing, it also shows that it also has some dissatisfaction to it, because you start ignoring your family. And in this story, eventually, George actually seems to realize this, that technology is ruining the family, and decides to shut it down. And on page 70, line 4 to 8, it says, "Lydia, it's off and it stays off, and the whole damn house dies of fear now. The more I see of the mess we put ourselves in, the more it sickens me. We've been contemplating our mechanical electronic navels for too long. My God, how we need a breath of honest air." So here we see that he finally realizes that technology is destroying the family. And also we also see Peter and Wendy being so dependent on technology in the home, that George and Lydia seems valueless to them. Throughout Peter and Wendy's behavior, we see how powerful and addictive technology can be, and how it's basically a part of the life that they can't be without. For example, when George punished Peter by shutting down the nursery, it says on page 61, line 23 to 25. "You know how difficult Peter is about that. When I punished him a month ago by locking the nursery for even a few hours, the tantrum he threw, and Wendy too, they lived for the nursery." So yeah, that shows how big the nursery is a part of their lives. Also, this story seems like an exaggeration of the today's culture and culture in our society. When children are watching, and families in general are watching TV during dinner, text message during conversations, and are constantly being distracted by technology or their phone. I think it's kind of scary that even though this text is 70 years old, it is still somewhat right about the way of portraying the technology's impact today. It also shows how technology is replacing humans in different situations. Even though today our houses aren't fully automatic, new inventions still keeps on replacing some of the things that we used to do manually as human beings. If this keeps on happening, we might one day feel useless and maybe even be too lazy to do anything ourselves. This is also showed on page 62, line 9 to 12, where Lydia tells George, "You look as if you didn't know what to do with yourself in this house either. You smoke a little more every morning and drink a little more every afternoon, and need a little more sedative every night. You're beginning to feel unnecessary too. In this case, from each day that passes, the parents start to feel more and more unnecessary, which leads to George might up ending having a drinking and smoking problem." So now I have to comment on the ending. I think that Wendy's way of asking the psychologist for a cup of tea is her way of trying to lull the doctor into thinking that everything is okay. She was trying to appear civilized, despite that she has just killed her parents without hesitating. So then maybe when his guards were down and he was thinking that everything is okay, they might try to kill him too. Now on to the message of the story. I think that Ray Bradbury's message of the story is that he's showing the consequences, the negative consequences it might have when humanity is being too dependent on technology. He's showing this by portraying the destruction of the Hadley family, and you can say that he's kind of voicing what might happen and the values we might lose, such as love, respect, and relationships with another in general when we rely so much on technology. So I think that Ray Bradbury's story is some sort of a warning about the potential destructive consequences of relying too much on technology, and what might happen when the human race picks technology over people. The last exercise I had to do was that I had to relate the Veldt to another text discussed in class. And if you look at the role of technology in the Veldt, you can relate it to another text written by Ray Bradbury called The Marionettes, Inc. To begin with, we get a feeling in both stories that technology seems like an innovative and modern solution to problems in the everyday life. For example, Brayling doesn't have to be with his nervous, controlling wife because he purchased a cyborg, which is identical to his physical appearance, which makes him able to fulfill his dreams and travel to Rio without his wife noticing it. And the Hadleys doesn't have to deal with the household duties thanks to the nursery and the automatic house in general. But then in the end, at both stories, we see how technology is so advanced that it eventually ends up going rogue, with the nursery killing the parents and the robot Brayling 2 ends up locking Brayling inside the cellar toolbox and eventually killing him as well. So in conclusion, both stories sheds a light on how the evolution of technology might look in the future if we aren't careful, and that it might be so advanced that it eventually will overpower human beings.